But I think the real reason that it wasn't a form that a lot of Native Americans were working in is that really the detective story was British in origin and came to the United States, but it has taken a long time for it to spread as a popular form of fiction in other cultures, European let alone.
Sure.
I mean, how many German crime writers can you just call off the top of your head? You know,
Yeah,
they're
that's true.
increasing, and there's been a tremendous wave of Scandinavian, but it tends to follow a really successful author like Henning Mankell kind of you know, drove the Scandinavian. There's a whole what they call tartan noir thing, and Ian Rankin and Val McDermott had a lot to do with you know, popularizing that.
I think that's what it takes. It just takes a really good writer who just opens that market, and then people who really enjoy that writer want to read more in that genre. I have so many readers who say to me, "Oh, I love Tony Hillerman's books, and that's why I started reading yours." You know, because I wanted to find out about another tribe, but it's in the same. It's really in the same genre. So.
But like Tony, you really have some wonderful credentials based upon your, you know, your Chief Left-Hand book, and you live in Colorado.
Right.
You're able to visit the Wind River,
which
is a real place.
Year. Yeah, it's a real place in Wyoming. But the Arapahoes were from, I'm not too far away. And the Arapahoes lived in Colorado, and that was their land. That was their ancestral land, the plains of Colorado, and that's how I got interested in them. And so I always say, when people ask me why I write about Wyoming, you know, I always say, well, you know, because that's where the government sent them. And had the government sent them to Kansas or Nebraska or wherever, that's what I'd be writing about, because I'm writing about these people who had lived in Colorado and had been part of the history of the state where I was born and raised. So
it's not just the Arapaho, though. The Cheyenne and the Shoshone, if I remember right.
The Cheyenne and the Utes. We had three tribes. The Utes were in the mountains, and the Arapaho and the Cheyenne were on the plains.
Okay.
So the Shoshone are north in Wyoming and also
Don't they
in
figure
Idaho.
into your books now and then?
They do, because the government, in its wisdom, sent the Arapaho to the Wind River Reservation after they had already placed the Shoshones on that reservation, and the tribes were natural enemies. So in their wisdom, the government said, you go live there with the Shoshones. So that's where they lived. And so the two tribes share that reservation. But they, and even though, you know, they have this past history of being enemies, they make it work. They get along actually quite well. So I bring in the Shoshones occasionally in some of my novels just because they're there. In Eye of the Wolf, I deal more with the Shoshone tribe. But really my interest is in the Arapahoes. And my main character in the novels is, I mean, I have two main characters, and one of them is Vicki Holden, an Arapaho lawyer, and the other is a white man, a Jesuit priest, who happens to be with a mission at the Wind River Reservation. So.
When you set up the series, did you anticipate that Father John was going to still be at the Wind River Reservation all these books later? That's worked for and against you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. You know, I didn't, because when I really didn't set up the series. You know, I wrote one novel. I had written these nonfiction books, and I thought, gee, I wonder if I can write a novel.
Okay.
And I thought, well, you know, I could write a novel like Tony Hillerman does, because I read his novels. I love them. And I thought, well, you know, he writes about the Navajos, and I could do that with the Arapahoes, I thought. And I really enjoyed reading mysteries, so I thought, if I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to write the kind of novel that I like to read, which is a mystery novel. So I thought, that's what I'll do. And I thought, you know, I'll write one book. That was The Eagle Catcher. Well, when we sold it, we sold it so that the University Press of Colorado brought it out in hard copy. But at the same time, we sold it to Berkeley Publishing, who brought it out in paperback. And Berkeley immediately said, well, we want 2 other novels. And so I said, what? And in The Eagle Catcher, I had set up some sexual tension between this tall, good-looking, red-headed priest and this beautiful Indian woman, thinking it would be one novel, thinking, well, I'm going to, you know, make this a little more interesting for this one novel, not knowing 13 novels down the road, I'm still dealing with this. So, well, it's really been interesting, and it's, you know, I hear from people all the time, and interestingly enough, I hear from as many men as women.
Do you?
I do, who want to get Father John and Vicki together. They want to find out, isn't there some way, you know, and they make all kinds of suggestions. You know, they tell me, you know, other religions do allow their ministers and their rabbis to marry, you know, and they say, you know, in fact, all other religions, and so why couldn't Father John become an Episcopalian, you know, and then they could get married, and, you know, I get all these wonderful suggestions from this, so it's really been,
Well, but
it's been fun.
you know, there's a lot more to it than just the fact that he is a Roman Catholic priest. I mean, they come, you know, she's an Arapaho, he's from
Oh,
wherever, he's
Boston.
Irish. Yeah, I was trying to remember
Yeah.
do I remember Marquette figuring into, or am I just imagining
no,
that?
I went to Marquette
Right,
University, but no, he comes from Boston. He went to Boston College.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember where he'd
Yeah.
gone to did he go to a Jesuit
Yeah, that's
college?
a Jesuit college. Yeah,
Right, and
Boston College.
that's, you know, the Jesuits are famous for that old song, you know, give me a child until he is 7.
Oh, right, that's right.
And then you have
True,
him.
true.
I'm not at all clear that even if the, you know, vow of celibacy were not a barrier to their relationship, whether full-time could ever really work.
Maybe not. I see Father John as kind of a renegade in a way, though. He's out there on an Indian reservation. He had started out on an academic career, thinking eventually he was going to be a professor, you know, at one of the Jesuit universities, maybe Boston College or Georgetown or someplace, you know, teaching American history. And he was derailed by his alcoholism, you know, and he's forever in rehabilitation, you know, he's always being rehabilitated. And he was sent to this Indian reservation that he had never heard of until that was the only place that wanted him once he got out of rehab, you know, and so that was the only place that needed him and that agreed to let him come. But it's there that he really finds himself. But I see him as kind of a renegade, you know. Now he's off the track, the fast track that he was on with the Jesuit order. He's out there all by himself. You know, he's with the Arapaho people, and he's really found himself there in a lot of ways. This is home for him now. So I don't know, you know, I don't think that they will ever get together. I will never get them together. I can say that because it's true. I will never get them together. And the reason for that is it really goes to their characters and to the character of Father John. He has taken vows, and he wants to live those vows.
Yeah, I think he does.
He
I think
does.
that's the real
So,
conflict. The other
that's
problem,
the
of course, the
conflict.
other conflict that you keep presenting them is the fact that he can be transferred by the Jesuits to some other place. I mean, he has a vow of obedience as well.
That's right.
And if they say to him, you've been there too long, and in fact, it's unusual that a priest would serve in a place like that for so long, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, he's been there 9 years. He's been there 6 in my novels. He's been there 6 years as the head of it, as the pastor of the mission. 3 years working for another pastor. But usually they only leave them in a place for about 6 years. So he's already 3 years overdue. And in the last book that came out last year, you know, the provincial, his boss, told him he had to go to Rome. So he, at the end of that book, The Girl with Braided Hair, he's off to Rome.
Right.
So now in Blood Memory, which has just come out, which is a different book, it's a suspense novel, does not feature Father John or Vicky, and it's set in Denver, all new cast of characters. I'm getting all these emails from people saying, well, what happened to Father John? Is he still in Rome? Is he ever coming back? And then they phrase it like this, is he ever going to get out of Rome? You know, as if I've sent him to the gulag. So he is coming back. He'll be back in next year's book. So he's going to be back on the reservation for a while. But he doesn't know how long. He's always got the Damocles sword hanging over him. He doesn't know how long he's going to stay
Well, he does. And of course, for Vicky, you know, his ghosts are really his derailed career and alcoholism, as you say. I mean, and, you know, genetically, I don't know if there's anything to genetic predisposition, but he's Irish. He's, you know,
they say there
melancholy.
Is, you know, and also for the native peoples, too. I mean, they have a really hard time dealing with alcohol.
Well, but that
so
is
do the
an
Celtics.
actual, I don't fully understand it, but it has something to do with the ability to process.
It does, and
because it applies not just to Native Americans, but to the Inuit people and Polynesian people.
To the Irish people and to the
Apparently so.
people from Scotland,
and
too.
Russians, maybe,
and Russians,
for all we know. So I've always thought it was climate that really drove some of them. You know, it's just so difficult to live in that weather.